Whoa, this is
Oh my God,
amazing.
it's you. You're on my holy shit.
This is
Well,
amazing.
I have your face on my refrigerator, so
Oh yeah, I sent you my face last year. I sent my face to so many people last year.
two of them.
I know I sent two. I was like, in case you lose one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two is better than one.
I need to put one on
Yeah.
my phone.
Put it on your phone, put it on your car. Tell the world about this face. That face is like 3 years old too, you know? I was like younger, fresher, you know.
I have a cute hat on.
I miss that hat. You know, I had that hat for like 2 months. I got it in Korea. I got it in Seoul. And it was one of those
Yeah,
hats where
yeah,
I
yeah,
tried it on. It was perfect. It looked perfect on me. And
yeah. It looks good on you.
I went to see fucking Aquaman at a really expensive movie theater. It was like $30 to see this fucking movie. And I lost it in that movie theater. And like I went back looking for it. They're like, yeah, we don't have it. It's gone. I was like, damn it.
But it's immortalized now on a magnet.
On a magnet, on your refrigerator,
Spread out across the world.
all over the continent. Everybody has one. Yeah. How are you, Helen?
Oh my God, I'm good. I'm all tired right now just because it's
Yeah.
Friday and end of the work
Mm,
week, but I'm doing
yeah.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm doing pretty well. I mean, all things considered.
You know, the last time I saw you, you were gearing up to start your studies, your graduate studies in social work. That was
Oh
the
my
last time
God.
I saw you. That was
Wow.
like,
Was that when we had pizza?
yes, yes.
Hmm.
And then Jenny
I remember
joined
that.
us
Yeah,
later.
yeah, Jenny came. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was great.
she grabbed a chair from the bar and then put it on the other side of the fence so she could smoke. I was like, that is some next level boss bitch shit. Like, we strive for
That's
that. I
right.
strive for that. I strive for that level of, audacity always, you know? But that was the last time I
Yeah,
saw you.
yeah, 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 totally. And you were on your way to California.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then since then, you have gotten a PhD
Yes.
and you're a comedian and you're doing all these shows around the world. Who knew? Sitting at John's
I
Pizzeria
know, man.
so many
Dude.
years ago, this
Oh,
would happen. That's,
I miss John's Pizza. But yeah, like, you know, I was like I think about you often. I think about you more often than you may realize. Like, when I started stand up, I was like, the one steadfast fan was Helen. She was always laughing at everything I said, you know? And it just like kind of
you're
affirmed.
funny. Yeah.
It was like this nice affirmation, confirmation. I was like, I think I could do this because Helen laughs all the time. You know,
Kevin was always laughing at me. I
always.
can do this
I could
on a
do it because
stage.
Helen's always laughing. Yes. And like when else was I thinking about you? I was thinking about you in July 20, was it 2019? No, July last year. I was
Hmm.
thinking about you when I was on
Oh.
LSD. I was like, Helen knows this place. For some deep reason. I was like, Helen has been
Oh
here.
my God.
And then I was
Oh
in
man.
Joshua Tree 2 weeks ago, Sunday. Like I took a big dose of mushrooms and I was like, Helen's also been here too. It was just
I
like one
actually
of those
have,
things.
I don't think I've been there,
To Joshua
um,
Tree?
but I'm honored that you would assume.
Yeah.
Oh no, well, Joshua Tree or mushrooms. I have not been to those places.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the LSD. How were your trips?
They were always good. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't really think like a quote unquote bad trip exists. I think challenging trips exist,
Hmm.
but there's always a way out of that. Or, it's like something you have to confront and then figure out.
Hmm.
Like the key to that is always one of two things. And it might not be two things, it's probably the same thing, but it's like acceptance and letting go, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Then it's like, okay, everything's
Yeah.
cool again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was having this conversation strangely well, kind of recently, a few months ago, with
Hmm.
my boyfriend, and I were having dinner with my realtor slash friend now, and he was asking us about what it's like to trip on acid. So
Hmm.
we had a sort of unexpected long conversation about, you know, preparing. Can you prepare? Like what, sort
Hmm.
of it, basically like it just, whatever happens is kind of pre-existing already somewhere in your
Hmm.
psyche. And
Hmm.
yeah, but I never had a bad experience
Hmm. Yeah,
on
I
it.
agree. I
Yeah.
think these bad experiences happen when they disrespect it. Like when they mix it with things they shouldn't mix it with, like alcohol, for instance. I think that's probably the
Hmm.
worst
Yeah,
thing
that
to do.
sounds bad.
Like I
Yeah.
was in Amsterdam and that's when I first tried mushrooms for the first time in my life. And she
Hmm.
was just like, I mean, you've taken LSD, so you could take any of these mushrooms and you'll be fine. And she was like, just two rules, drink water and don't drink alcohol. And that's it,
Hmm.
And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, yeah,
Hmm.
those are very easy rules.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I think that's when the bad demons happen, when they mix with alcohol or they mix it with like other substances that they shouldn't be mixing it with, which I
Hmm.
think is a
Hmm.
disrespect of the substances which are meant for like this spiritual, deep kind of experience, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Were you with other people or were you alone?
When I take LSD, like the first time I took LSD, I had a trip sitter. But
Uh-huh.
since then, whenever I take LSD, and I only do LSD once a year, I always do it alone because that's my preference. And
Mm.
when I take mushrooms, I've done it with the same friend both times, and both times she was kind of like my caretaker, because she's one of those people whose like portals kind of opened already, those like
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
evolved alien like people who's very like in touch with their wild primal selves. She's one of those,
Mm-hmm.
whereas
Mm-hmm.
like me, I have to really work at that. I, I have to
Really?
I have to work at my wildness. Really, I do. Like
Peel away the neuroses to like to
yeah.
chip away at the, yeah.
Yeah,
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 I think a
yeah.
lot of us, yeah, we've but at the same time, like we're also so controlled by those primal urges, the whole fight
Oh.
flight stuff all the
Mhm.
time. Like that's
Mhm.
so unconscious. But then
Yeah.
like yeah, but then accessing maybe like the deeper wisdom, right, that we hold
Yeah.
in our
Yeah.
mind and body
We all have
systems.
it.
Yeah.
We all have
Yeah.
that deeper wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I started seeing how you're like a therapist now, right? I mean, that's what you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was like, yeah, it's yeah, makes sense, you know. Yeah, because you're also an artist. You're like a videographer. You were a dancer, right?
No.
Y- no, you were never a dancer.
Mm-mm.
Why do I
No.
keep thinking you
I
used to
like to
dance?
dance.
Oh,
Well, I
okay.
mean, when I was a kid,
Oh, okay.
like yeah, a child of Korean immigrant parents. So I did all of those things.
Okay.
I liked dancing, but not I never like studied it or
So weird.
yeah.
For some
Yeah.
reason in my head.
I did theater. I did theater.
Ah,
So
really?
yeah.
So like dramatic theater, like dramatic arts theater?
Hmm. Yep.
Wow. So you were an
Yep.
actress, basically.
Yeah, I actually when I first started, my first college was actually like a theater conservatory. Um,
Oh.
yeah, I was really into, but then I just kind of was like, I don't know if I want that life.
Really?
It just was
Why?
like I don't well, I didn't I was like I don't know if I want to, as an actor, I think it's so one of the biggest challenges that I didn't think that I could really be okay with was that so much of your career as an actor is sort of determined on the judgment of
Mm-hmm.
other people who deem,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to be sort of at, vulnerable or like at the mercy of like
Mm-hmm.
all of
Mm-hmm.
those factors, and then
Yeah.
it's like, okay, do you just start your own theater company? But it's like, on what? Well, how are we going to make a living? I mean, it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
was really, yeah, the options weren't all
Yeah.
like great. So,
Mm.
yeah. But no, but I
Yeah.
did that for a long time. Yeah, it was like theater. But that led to, I mean, I always had a love for film, and then it kind of
Right.
like
I mean, you were a filmmaker. You are a
easily,
filmmaker.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then it really like bled into the filmmaking pretty easily from
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Because, I mean, I'm in LA and doing stand up, and the way that comics get their quote unquote big break is they have to be shown on television. And once people
Mm,
see you on television, then you will get more headlining spots eventually and sell out theaters, and the ball will get rolling. And I'm just like, I can't do that. I can't see
mm,
myself auditioning and twiddling my thumbs, waiting around for callbacks and then another one. And it's exactly the same reason. And all
yeah.
my actor friends are permanently broken,
Mm,
like they're a constant nervous wreck. And I'm just not built for that, like I really don't give a flying fuck what people think of me and, expect out of me. Even something minor, like I was at a show and there was a comedy photographer and he was like directing me to do stuff and I was so defiant, like he'd be like, pretend like this shoe was a phone, and I'm like, you're such a hack. Like I hate you. Like I hate that you're making me doing that. I'm like complaining and bitching and moaning the whole time because I just didn't want this stupid young white dude telling me what to do. But as an actor and an actress, you have to be open to that. You have to be willing to cooperate, work, and
mm,
do as they say. And I'm like, what am I built for? What am I built for? And I'm like doing all this like stuff, and I realized I was like, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and that's what I want to
mm-hmm.
be. I want to be a director or a showrunner. I'm built as a leader. I'm not built to
Yeah,
be a
yeah,
fucking
yeah.
puppet,
Mm-hmm. For
And I had to
sure.
be
Yeah.
specific too. I had to be like, what kind of filmmaker? I was like, cult classic, you know, not like some fucking mainstream yada yada.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Sorry, my cat's getting in on
it's
the
okay.
action.
Is
Okay,
this
here
the
she
same
is.
cat?
No, this is a different cat. I got her, when did I get her? 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Okay.
yeah, here she is.
Hello, cat. Wow. What's her
There's
name?
the Williamsburg Bridge. Her
Ooh.
name's Karuna.
Hi, Karuna. She's cute.
Yeah, if you ever need to know what the traffic is like on the bridge, I can always tell you. Right
I will
now,
I
it's
will call
it's
you for
usually
that.
always backed up, like going into Manhattan. But going into Brooklyn, it's usually pretty
So are you in the
good.
Brooklyn part or are you in the Manhattan part?
I'm in the Manhattan part, Lower
Oh
East
wow.
Side. Yeah, you gotta
Wow.
come visit. Yeah,
When's the
it's
last time you
fun.
lived in Manhattan?
The last time I lived in Manhattan was in, God, oh,
Like forever ago
oh
probably.
man, it was a long time ago. It was like
Because you were in Brooklyn for a long time and then you were in Queens for a while.
1998 for like a year, and I lived in a tenement
Oh,
building.
Alphabet City? Were you in Alphabet City?
No, I was on Bleecker. I was like
Oh wow.
the worst
God
fucking
damn.
block on Bleecker Street.
Jesus.
It was between Sullivan and Thompson.
Wow.
Yeah,
Ooh.
it was like, where all the double-decker buses of tourists would go. It was like awful. And it was
Wow.
the worst. It was like the horror story apartment that
Yeah.
people talk about in New York
Yeah.
City.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like what makes New York, like, oh, I
Uh-huh.
like survive, like this is
Yeah.
that place. Like it was, there was a bathtub in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And then there was like the toilet, which had we had our own key to it, so we
Oh
had to
my
lock, but you
Lord.
had to lock it. It was in the hallway.
That's so fucking awful.
And the landlords were evil. They were so awful. They were just like mean, aggressive. They had like a lot of eventually there was a big like tenant strike, rent strike in the
Hmm.
building because it was so bad. And
Yeah.
when we went
Yeah.
to the attorney general, we found out like these people had had tons of lawsuits against them over the
They're
years.
all crooks.
Yeah,
They're all
it was
crooks.
really, really, they were mean. Andriani, their last name. Just beware. Anyone
That's the thing. You never
listening,
forget. You
like,
never fucking forget
oh no,
these
I'll never
assholes.
forget. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're like long gone because they were like pretty ancient when I
Yeah.
knew them, but like, oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah, they do have offspring. So I don't know. Maybe they've done better, but those.
Offspring. They had more demon children who took it on and continue to be these horrible landlords. Yeah, it's
Ah,
I mean, I'm sure it's drastically changed though, right? I mean, Manhattan's like no longer the Manhattan that you knew in the 90s, I'm sure, right?
no, yeah, yeah. Very different. What you grew up like, where'd you grow up? Did you go
I grew up
in
in Bay
Queens?
Ridge, Brooklyn,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. Right.
then Rockland County, New York. So it was like
Right.
a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
drastic jump from very
Mm-hmm.
diverse, like literally my if you look at these class photos when I was a child, they're like you have Chinese kids, you have black kids, you have Latinx kids, you have Eastern European kids. And like half of them were in ESL with me.
Mm.
And then I fucking moved to Rockland County, New York, and that was like all
Oh
Irish.
wow. Yeah.
Everybody's a racist and a conservative, a few Jews,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
was it. And then it was me. It was a nightmare. I'm like, fuck
Oh
my
my
life.
God.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's how it goes.
But now you're in LA.
Now I'm
Are
in
you
LA.
like, are you surrounded by Korean people?
I have a pocket of Korean American comedian friends here. I do.
Nice.
And
Awesome.
I know a couple of Korean American filmmakers here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it took me a long time to feel at home here, though. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like New York was home
Yeah.
for so long. And I noticed this is like a typical thing. When New York transplants move to LA, they can't stop talking about New York. It's very annoying, actually. Now that I'm like over that phase, like when I hear other New Yorkers come here and talk about New York, I'm like, can you shut the hell up? Like, just be quiet,
I know
you know?
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, that's when I
Oh,
moved to the Bay Area. Yeah, it was the
oh,
same.
we're
Yeah,
so annoying when we
yeah,
first moved to
yeah.
California.
I
We're the
know because
worst.
it's just like, oh, New York. It's not like New York. It's not. I mean, I don't think I ever. It was just kind of, you get to a point where you're like, either just like shut up and accept where you are or go back. And like, I came
Exactly.
back. I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
just
yeah.
like, I can't do
Yeah.
this. I'm like,
Yeah,
I hate this place. It's not
I
New
know. I
York.
know.
I'm going
I
back
know.
to New York. But
I
I know,
hate it
yeah,
every waking
I
moment. Yeah.
couldn't, yeah, I
Yeah.
couldn't like get through that hump but
Uh-uh.
I'm sure like now that you've moved past that phase, it
No,
would
it
be
took,
like really
this is what
annoying.
it took. Like, I was here and I was like, I'm only gonna go to school. Fucking, it was a nightmare. Like, I was like at home all the time. I was depressed. I was like, all this shit. I was like, I hate LA. I hate LA. And then I had to leave LA. I was like, I fucking hate it here. Why am I here? So I moved to
Hmm.
Berlin for a while. And then I was
Right.
like, okay, like Berlin's cool. Like Berlin's a vibe. I liked
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I loved Berlin because there were so many artists there, but there's no capital in Berlin like in New York and LA.
Mm.
So everybody's chill. You know what I'm saying? Everybody just focuses on their art because that's fun and they connect with everybody quickly because everybody's an artist and nobody's competing against one another. And like it was so beautiful that experience.
Mm.
And then I went to Seoul for a
Nice.
bit to do my research because I was doing field work in Seoul. And then I went back to Berlin for a while, and then I came back to LA. And when I first got back to LA,
Okay.
like I was like, okay, I know now that the United States is number one when it comes to showbiz and entertainment. I know this now.
Mm, mm.
And, especially for stand-up comedy, no, no,
Yeah.
no country beats America. That I knew
Mm,
for certain by then because I had
mm,
toured the
mm-hmm.
world basically and I've done
Yeah,
shows all over
yeah,
the fucking planet. I was like, no,
yeah.
and I was like, I had a deep respect and reverence for the United States and for New York and LA, but I'm like, my shit is in LA, so I gotta make peace with it. And initially it was hard,
Mm-hmm.
but then when the ball started getting rolling and I was getting booked at clubs and stuff, and I started making more comedian friends, it was like better. And now I'm at a point where like I finished my PhD and I'm applying for tenure track jobs, but I really want to stay in LA, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome.
But
When
yeah,
did you start doing stand up?
I started while I was in grad school. So
Uh-huh.
I'm
In
entering,
LA.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Started in LA and then very soon after I started here, I went to Berlin and Seoul. And, that's the nice thing about stand up is like you can go to any city in the world and there is a stand up community
Mm-hmm.
there and you could do spots, you could do shows. Um, and comics just connect with one another very quickly and easily because we're all kind of
Mm-hmm.
the same
Mm-hmm.
species, like
Mm-hmm.
we all
Mm-hmm.
come from
Mm-hmm.
trauma and we lack boundaries and we're funny and it's like it's kind of nice. Yeah.
That's so awesome. But how did you, so what kind of brought you to that first time that you did it? Like, had you tried it before and or like what how did the um yeah, how did you start? Like what was the
So I've
beginning like?
wanted to do stand up since I was in high school.
Uh-huh.
Because, like, since high school, I had a lot of friends, like, laughing all the time. I mean, since childhood, honestly, since I was a child, like, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of friends who liked me just liked me because I was funny. And
Mm-hmm.
I've wanted to do stand up when I saw that, like, it was an actual career choice. When I noticed it in high school, I was like, I want to do stand up. But I was afraid. It is like the
Mm-hmm.
scariest thing to do on earth, I think. I think it's the
Yeah.
scariest thing to do on earth. And I was just
Yeah.
afraid. So I started doing all these things that went around it. Like even getting into
Mm-hmm.
filmmaking, was going
Mm-hmm.
around it. I mean, you know, writing is my first kind of form of expression, so that's always
Yeah.
there. And I've written books, I've translated books, but stand up is at the core, it's writing. You have to be a good writer. And I was
Mm-hmm.
just like
Mm-hmm.
afraid and afraid. And I was driving one of the Korean American filmmaker women that I told you about here in LA. She was sitting in the backseat of my car and I was driving and I was like just talking shit and she was like laughing. In the middle, she goes, "Have you ever considered stand up?" And I was like, "Of course I've considered stand up. Of course I've considered it." And she's like, "Why aren't you doing it?" I was like, "Because I have morbid stage fright." And then she just looked at
Mm.
me without any empathy or sympathy whatsoever, just very dry cut. And she goes, "I think you should get over it." And that was all I needed. I just needed this very, like straightforward, deadpan push. Like, you're the
Mm-hmm.
only one that's standing in your own way kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
literally after she said that, I had to go to Helsinki for some academic conference and I was in the hotel writing jokes. Like,
Awesome.
yeah. And then I think a month later, I was at the Improv doing a.
Oh my
I
God.
drank like 9 vodkas on the rocks the first time I went up. I was shit
Yeah.
faced. But then after like 3 times, I was like, I don't want to be drunk when I'm on stage, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
it seems
Mm-hmm.
stupid.
When you really get to that point where it's exactly that. Like it just doesn't serve me anymore. I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm not really getting anything out of this. And it's just like you don't even think about it. I mean, it's the same thing with
Exactly.
like quitting smoking for me. It
Yeah,
was just like, I'm just
I'm done.
done. Which
I'm
was
done.
crazy because I
It
used
is.
to love it
I
so
know.
much,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then I was just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
That was it. I like
Isn't that
didn't
weird?
need,
Yeah.
yeah. It was great. I don't miss it. I mean, I'll have like a glass of wine every once in a while, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't even. Oh, I think I was with you one time and like I tried to have a cocktail and
Uh-huh.
I was just like, my body is going to like explode and implode at the same time if I keep drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just couldn't. It was just at a
I
point where
hated
like
it.
I don't
Yeah,
even like
yeah,
the liquor.
yeah,
I was like, nope, not even gonna
yeah.
happen anymore. So yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's interesting how our bodies just know more, of what
Mm-hmm.
what it is that I don't know if you're into this stuff. Like, are you into that eight body types thing, the constitution thing? Have you heard of this? So, you know
No.
how in Eastern medicine you have four body types? That's how they separate it. Like when you go to the Honey's Hat, like the doctor, he takes
Mm-hmm.
your pulse and stuff. Started
Mm-hmm.
in India, China, went to China, and then spread to Korea and Japan. And it's four body types. It's like acupuncture, the whole herbal
Okay.
medicine. So they did it four body types. And then some dude
Okay.
in Korea, a doctor, he made it more specific to eight body types.
Hmm.
And there are some practitioners in New York. If you want, I could recommend you a guy. They have
Oh
practitioners here
yeah.
in Los Angeles. All they do is they just take your pulse and then they just tell you what your body type is.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there are all these food groups that you should, or foods that that are good for your constitution,
Right, right.
foods that are like
Yeah.
neutral. They have like a delta symbol, and it's like if you're low on energy and if you eat these foods, then it brings your energy up. And then there are
So it's like
foods that you should
Ayurveda, right? Which is
maybe,
some,
I don't know what that
but
is,
this
but
is, yeah, which started in India. But this is
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
you're describing something else too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's like
Okay.
essentially
Cool.
that, like whatever foods are good for you
Yeah.
and bad for you. Even like certain activities, like there are certain sports
Mm-hmm.
that are good for you, other sports that you should avoid.
Yeah.
Even
Mm-hmm.
climate, like, oh, if you want to go on a vacation, they
Right.
told me like don't go to like hot, humid tropical places because you sweat a
Mm-hmm.
lot anyway. You should be in like cool, dry places. I was
Yeah,
like,
that's like
okay.
me too.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
just tell you these things and um yeah, like maybe, oh, and alcohol, it was like, don't drink any of this. Like all this alcohol is bad.
Mm.
And this was 2016 when I first learned of all this stuff about myself. And he was like, I know you like coffee, but you might want to give up coffee. I was like, okay. And he was like, also, um, alcohol's bad for you. I was like, I will quit coffee. I'm not gonna quit alcohol, but I will quit coffee. So in 2016, I stopped drinking coffee. I was
Oh,
just like,
wow.
that was hard. That was really hard.
That would be so hard. I don't know if I could do that.
Coffee is
Yeah, I
a
don't know.
real drug. I was like, this is
Yeah.
a real for real drug. Because when I quit
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
coffee, all that caffeine and milk, because milk has a lot of sugar, I didn't know this was
Yeah.
full of sugar, it just leaves your body so fast. And the
Uh,
withdrawal from that, not only do you get the headaches, everybody talks about the headaches, but it was also like I couldn't even sit up straight because my body just had zero energy. I couldn't even sit up. I remember I was on the bus. I was like leaning like this. I was like, oh my God, when am I going to get home? And I was taking like 14-hour naps. It was insane. I thought I was dying. I was like, I emailed the doctor. I was like, dude, like I quit coffee and I feel like I'm dying. He's like, that stuff leaves your body really fast. So like drink some
Oof.
orange juice.
Wow.
It's like drink some green tea. And green tea is okay
Uh-huh.
with me. So
Yeah.
that's become a whole hobby too. Like I drink green tea all the time now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I
Like
have a
expensive green
feeling you
tea.
would,
Like,
of
like
course.
legit green
Yeah,
tea.
like the, yeah.
Come on. There's some green teas that they give me. I'm like, how is this tea? This just tastes like water, you know? Like, but shit.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Damn.
you
Yeah,
just
I
gotta
wonder what that's
censor
called,
that.
but that's very similar to Ayurveda. It's like very similar kind of thing where like there are three, they're called like doshas, and there's like Pitta, Vata, Kapha, which is
Mm,
fire, is Pitta, Vata is air, Kapha is earth.
mm,
And like we have like all of us have all three, but for many of us, like one or two are more dominant. So like
mm,
Pitta is fire, and that also it's describes like your temperament, your body type, how
mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm,
sleep, like how you
mm-hmm,
digest food, and like all this stuff. So yeah, it's like really, and then depending on what you need to balance, they'll tell you to like eat other foods that would like. So
mm-hmm.
I have a lot of, you probably too do too, like a lot of pitta. So then
Hmm.
we have to like have things that pacify. the
Yeah.
pitta a little bit,
Yeah.
that like balance the fire and
Yeah,
stuff.
balances my
So
fire. He was like, I have a lot of heat in my body, so I should avoid like
yeah,
ginger, ginseng, garlic. Like, everybody thinks ginseng, especially Koreans, they think ginseng is good for you and they like eat a
yeah,
shit ton of
yeah,
ginseng. Ginseng is like one of the
right.
worst things for me. It's like
Mm.
poison to me because it's a
Oh
root
wow.
and ginseng brings heat up in your body and
Yeah,
it's like really bad for me. And it's bad for my
yeah,
dad. It's like the constitution thing is it's genetic too. It's inherited from parents.
yeah.
Um, but like my mom, she and I are totally the opposite. My mom has like the quote
Mm.
unquote cowboy diet. She could eat like cheeseburgers and bread and drink coffee at midnight and still go to sleep. It's crazy. But like for me, he was like, you can't have any spicy foods because you have too much heat in your body. He's like, you should avoid wheat. You should avoid any bovine related products. I was like, so basically just be unhappy? You mean just like be miserable? Huh? No coffee, no booze, no McDonald's. What the fuck? He's like, potatoes are really bad for you too. I was like, oh my God. I was like,
No,
what am I supposed
that's
to eat?
terrible.
He's like, you're supposed to eat seafood, like ocean fish and greens. I was like, so be hungry. You want me to be hungry constantly? And when I first tried to stick to this diet, I was just broke because fish and
Oh my
greens, they're not
God.
filling and they're really expensive. And I was just like, oh my God, I can't fucking afford my own diet. This is so sad. But
Oh
it is
man.
related to one's personality and sensibilities. Like they were like,
Yeah.
you know, um, like solitary kinds of activities are better for you. I was like, yes, yeah, I'm not a good team player. It's like a musician or lawyer, professor. I was like, yeah, okay, fine. They're like, it's a very sensitive constitution, but creative.
Well,
And I was like, okay,
writer too, right?
fine. Yeah,
Writing is
writer,
like,
very
yeah,
solitary. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
And he was
Even
a
like trying to
stand-up, right?
stand-up's
When
a
you
very
were,
lonely thing, yeah.
mm-hmm,
And it's
mm-hmm,
preferred that way. It's that there's this.
mm.
I noticed I created this hierarchy. It doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. So if anybody's listening, don't be offended. But it's just my opinion, right? I think at the bottom you have sketch and improv people. They got to work in
Mm-hmm.
teams and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And then right above them you have the stand-up comedians who don't need anybody. But right above that are the clowns. I have a huge respect and admiration for clowns because stand-ups, they need an audience. If the audience
yeah.
doesn't laugh,
Right.
they get super insecure very fast.
Ah.
But clowns don't give a fuck whether you're there or not there, laughing, crying. Clowns, like their effort, their whole effort is to fail at whatever it is that they're trying to achieve and to really, you know, I'm just like, wow. Like the more I study the
Oh
tenets of
man,
clowning, the more
that's
clowns I talk to about
hilarious.
their philosophy, I'm just like in awe. I'm like, damn.
And you would imagine like as a like for clowns, like there's also a certain kind of like that there's a level of like societal like they're almost like abject in some it's like because I'm like, oh, clowns, no
Mm-hmm.
way, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
they're not like, why would I think that's funny?
Yeah.
But I would imagine if you choose that path, you just be
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm an outlaw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're chaos. Yeah. It's anarchy. They just go to a fucking street corner and start like pretending there's a box. I mean, miming is clowning. It's like they're like, oh, so brave. I find that courageous and fearless. I'm sure you've seen that show Baskets. Have you seen Baskets?
Okay, yeah. So we started watching it, and I haven't continued, but I should. I want to. Like
The
what's it
tenets of
on? Like
clowning
Hulu or
are
something?
fully in
Yeah,
there. It's fully in there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was like, this show's brilliant. Like the more I learn
Yeah.
about
Mm-hmm.
clowning, I'm like, the show is genius.
Hmm.
Even like that show
Nice.
you loved, Nathan For You. Weren't you a huge fan of that show? Was that you? No, you were
No.
into Drunk History. Yeah, that's the show you were really into. That's what you were showing me.
It's so funny because like we haven't talked. I mean, yeah, and I still appreciate that. And but
Yeah.
like all of the, it's like you keep bringing up these things that are from like this such a like specific time, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
That that apartment on in Crown Heights,
Uh-huh.
they
I love that
totally
apartment.
had
I
like
I have
phased that
dreams
out.
about it. Yeah. It was such a
That was nice.
magical place. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 totally. Yeah, but sorry. Anyway, yeah, I haven't thought about drunk history for a while, but
Yeah. I'm just
that was
confusing it with
funny.
that. I think you'd find Nathan for You pretty interesting. It's like this guy, he's from Canada. He has a bachelor's in business something, and he just goes to random small businesses and then offers to help them. And the ideas that he suggests are ludicrous, ludicrous. And these people say yes, they go with it, and it's like so awkward. It's like cringe comedy. It's like cringe humor, that
Yeah,
kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested in hearing what you think. I made a drunk history
nice.
video of my own. Did I tell you this?
No,
I'll send it to
I
you.
had
It's
no.
called
Please do.
it's
Yeah.
called Drunk Korean American History. And I got shit-faced drunk. This was March 2020. Yeah. March or April 2020. I
Oh
sat in front of
shit.
my computer. I got fucking wasted. And then I started narrating the history of this comedian, Korean American comedian named Johnny Yoon. Do you know about Johnny Yoon?
No.
Dude, there was this guy in the 70s who moved to America in his 30s, a Korean guy. He moved to America, became an opera singer, and then
What?
in New York, he became an opera singer in fucking New York. And then he moved to LA and then just immediately just became a stand-up comedian. And he
Oh
had
my God.
3 shows on NBC. 3.
What?
He had his own variety show on NBC. He had
Holy
two
shit.
pilots. He had 2 series. Yeah. And then of course NBC overworked the shit out of him and he had a mental breakdown and then he like said fuck you NBC and he left, but
Oh my God.
he had his own local TV variety show that he continued to do with a Korean American audience,
Huh.
and he did a couple movies. He wrote and directed his own movie called They Call Me Bruce, which became a cult classic. And yeah,
Wow.
he died I think a year ago
Oh
in a
wow.
home, but
Hmm.
there was this dude who had a
Holy
career
shit. That
and
is
a
crazy.
sitcom in the year 1980.
Wow.
He was on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson a bunch of times. Like it's amazing
I
how
had
like
no idea. I had no idea.
we just
Yeah,
don't know our history. Isn't that
that's
fucking
crazy.
wild? Yeah, like we
Mm-hmm.
Korean Americans have a really how do you say, like, random and but rich kinds of histories
Mm-hmm.
like all over the world, and it's like
Yeah.
once we
Mm-hmm.
find out, it's like what? This
Yeah,
was here.
that's nuts. Holy shit. I
Yeah.
would love to see. So your drunk history is telling
About
his
him.
story?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm just
Nice.
trashed and just doing it the best I could. Um, yeah. Yeah. And like
Awesome.
I was TAing for this American TV history course, and the professor was like, "Can I include your video in there?" I was like, "No, I don't want my students to see me all shit-faced." And what is that? I was like, "No." But yeah, fucking A. Can I ask you about
Awesome.
your practice though? Like,
Yeah.
what kinds of things do you emphasize in your work? What kinds of themes do you focus on? Methods, or what philosophy do you have?
Yeah. You mean like my clinical work, therapeutic
Mm-hmm.
work?
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I guess like what sort of like led into it was teaching, right? When I was working with kids in
Yes.
schools and doing like video and digital photography, digital
Yeah.
media.
Yeah.
And I never had any interest in, I mean, it's cool if they can like learn some good skills and become proficient or whatever, but I really didn't give a shit about that. It
Hmm.
was really much more about like, how can these tools be useful in helping you make sense of who you are and your
Mm,
world and work through all the shit that's going on inside of you, right? And so eventually, and then that was like I was doing the project with immigrant youth in Queens, and I was just kind of always wanting to do more for these kids. Like this is just, I'm like, this is great, but I mean, in the end, it's like, who cares? Like I started to really question, and this is personal and it's not a judgment on other
Mhm.
people who obviously I
Mhm.
think art is important and
Mhm.
it needs to be, and all, but for me personally, it was like, why I can't, it's like the same reason why I could never get into like feature filmmaking, because I was like, why would I make up a bunch of stories about, like when there's real shit going on in the world, and
Right.
I feel like I need to be more directly engaged.
Mhm.
I mean, again, I love feature films. I
Mhm.
love, it's like nothing, but personally, it was just sort of like, what's the meaning behind all of this? And in the end, like, because I wasn't interested in playing the whole like schmoozy, networky, get your, ever.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
like, I really need to figure out what I'm actually doing, and then I was also kind of like deepening into like my spiritual practice
Mhm.
and meditating and
Mhm.
learning more about Buddhist psychology,
Mm.
and then it was just like things were like, oh, okay, this is starting to like slowly, like the path started to like be unearthed, like as I was sort of getting out of the way of what was really underneath it. So
Mm.
um yeah, so it kind of led into being like one day realizing that what I was doing was similar to what therapists do. And a lot of my teachers at that time were therapists who I really admired the way that they work. So that kind of
Mm.
started it. And that was sort of how when I first got interested in doing the work of helping people, it was like a fascination with like similar, and as an artist, right? You're interested in the psyche and you're
Mhm.
interested in like images and symbology and the unconscious, and how to make meaning of that in your life, and how do we use that to heal? How are we, when we experience trauma, what are the ways that we actually find ways to heal through it? And so that like all of that was really like a part of my fascination into looking at, and originally it was like really interested in what's called like psychodynamic,
Mm.
which is more, and like, and kind of like psychoanalysis, which is more
Mm.
like looking at the unconscious and
Mhm.
symbols. And I thought, that's kind of where I would go.
Mhm.
But then when I was in social work school, I ended up getting my second year internship at this place called the Ackerman Institute, which was family therapy. And, it was like a very sort of, everybody's like, oh, it's such a like prestigious thing. You should go,
Mm.
So I was like, cool. I have no idea if I want to be a family therapist. I don't know if
Hmm.
I'm even going to like it, but
Right.
I'll try. And it was a really different way of working. It was like a total paradigm shift, like moving from working individually into relationships, and understanding how the internal life of the psyche is also co-created with and by relationships, right? And I was like, this is so fascinating, because it's like all of that's still happening and all of that's in the room, but then we're not, as a therapist, like you're not in this sort of privileged position. I think there's a power differential that's often too elevated, I think, in traditional Western forms of therapy, where like the
Right.
therapist is like all knowing, and
Mhm.
but in family or in systemic work, it was like it was very equalizing, where it was like
Mm.
the problem is not in like one person.
Mhm.
The problem is created through the dynamics, and
Mhm.
it's relational. And I'm just, as a therapist, I'm just one piece of like helping to facilitate like how deeper like understanding or like movement and relationships. And
Yeah.
it was just a really different way of working. And I was working with this one family. It was actually a family of artists. There was the
Wow.
mom was a dancer and the dad was a filmmaker, and the kids were like so creative. And
Wow.
there was one kid with a lot of learning differences who was kind of, when they came in, like he was sort of like what's often called the identified client, like he was the problem. So the mom was like, oh, lots of stories about how problematic like this kid
Mhm.
is and her relationship, and
Mhm.
so of course we're questioning that,
Mhm.
I mean, listening to their concerns
Hmm.
and validating, but also like, well, probably more than just like this kid was born
Right.
and created all the problems in your
Exactly.
family. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
um, yeah. And then it was kind of working with them and being able to like do creative things and like integrate the meditation sometimes or like use like the
Mm-hmm.
language of and like understand them as artists as well and like the family's creative life
Hmm.
and that's also, in family therapy, like we're bringing everything in the room, like all these things
Yeah.
are really important to them. So I think like when I started to see some shifts in how the mother in particular was able to like the shifts in her and her way of understanding or being more curious about her child and how that changed the relationship for the whole family.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like when I started to see that, I was like, okay, this is really amazing. So I just sort of since then, I've only been training in family systems therapy. So that's, but I do individual therapy as well. But
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of very informed by the sort of interdependence of
Mm-hmm.
relationships that are always at play and it's takes pathology out of it. So you're like, I mean, sometimes diagnosis is helpful. Sometimes it's helpful to have something you can really name and have a sort of context to make sense of what's going on and some that's helpful for medications. All of that is,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not the only thing, right? So it has to be like in conjunction with lots of resources and your relationships and creativity or humor and like all of
Yes.
these things so um yeah so that's kind of how I see in my private practice it's primarily couples and some individuals every once in a while I get a family case but that's kind of yeah I sort of all of that's how I primarily how I practice, but I also like, the contemplative psychotherapy and the Buddhist psychology is always there because it's sort of
Mm-hmm.
just embedded in how I see understanding things, and then and definitely like the social justice lens and
Mm-hmm.
understanding how our experiences of systemic oppression, racism, homophobia, transphobia, like also really impact all of this, right? And what might be
Mm-hmm.
happening for us and what's happening in relationships. So
Right.
when I was seeing a family where there was a adult trans child, and with their sibling, there was a lot of there was a lot of like veiled and sometimes not so veiled transphobia
Mm.
happening, although there's a lot of language around like, oh, I'm very accepting, like, but like to
Mm.
be able to actually get underneath and challenge some of that.
Mm-hmm.
So as a family therapist, you're a little bit more, you can be more active and
Mm.
be a little bit more in the, like when necessary. So sometimes, I'll sort of, step in and try, there's a bit of like, how can we understand the ways that our our identities of both marginalization, but also privilege, and
Mm-hmm.
are always at play, and how that
Mm-hmm.
impacts our how we understand each other, our capacities to be in relationship with each other. Um, yeah, so it's definitely, I'm always thinking about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, um,
It's
yeah,
so interesting.
it's fun. It's good.
Like I love everything you're saying here, especially when you were talking about like that big aha moment when you realize like, oh, this the identity creation or the formation of your coming into being is a it happens with your external environment and the people who are around you. Um, I've been reading a lot of autobiographies by like artists and filmmakers. Like I read Ingmar Bergman's autobiography
Mm.
recently, The Magic Lantern. Have you read this book?
No.
I think you would love this
Uh,
book.
Hmm.
Um, The
Nice.
Magic Lantern. I'm
Okay.
not a Bergman fan per se.
Fan. Uh-huh.
I respect him as an auteur, but I'm not a fan of his movies per se. I
Hmm.
love his writing. And I also watched this documentary about David Lynch. It's like a profile on David Lynch. And again, David Lynch, I respect him as an auteur. I'm not necessarily a fan of all of his works, like all these white boys
Mhm.
are, but I'm a big fan
Yeah.
of his mind. And in
Mhm.
both of these things, these autobiographies or bios, they talk about their parents a lot and their sibling
Mhm.
a lot. Like that is
Yeah.
such a like first and core construction
Yeah.
of who you are. It's like, and you see that in every single autobiography. They talk about their parents first. It's like,
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
does where does everything that we're trying to break out of and prove wrong or prove against come from? It comes from parents, you know?
Yeah.
And I see this
Mhm.
time and time again. And I was thinking
Mhm.
a lot about like Korean dramas and how almost every single Korean drama starts out with the orphan trope. The
Huh.
protagonist is always an orphan. Always. Always, you know? And I was like, why? Why? Why are they an
Mm.
orphan? You know? And like, yeah, you got other things. It's like, okay, well, Korean War trauma and like there were a lot of orphans, a lot of adoptees, da, 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 you have that. But then you
Yeah.
also have like from like an artistic standpoint, you have to kick out the parent. You got to kick out the authority in your mind. You got to break out of them, you know? You got to break out of their
Mhm.
influence somehow. It's like almost an impossibility because their influence is always there. Like for instance,
Mhm.
I was drawing a bunch of dinosaurs when I was most recently on acid. I was like drawing a dinosaur over and over again because I had asked, my intention was, I want to become fearless. I was like, how do I
Mm.
become fearless? And the answer was, be brave. It was very simple. And I
Did the
remember
dinosaur say that to you?
a
I gotta be
dinosaur said
brave.
that to me one time. Like I was at my baby cousin's house when I was in middle school, and she was watching the Rainbow Fish video, like a DVD.
Uh-huh.
And after the Rainbow Fish movie, there was another movie like attached to this, and it was like about a dinosaur and some kids, and these kids were afraid, and this big dinosaur showed up and said, "Be brave," like singing a song. And I was dying laughing. I thought it was just the funniest thing I've ever seen. I don't know why, but it cracked me up. This big dinosaur telling the
Oh.
kids to be brave, and I was burned in my memory, but I had forgotten about it until that moment when I was like tripping and drawing dinosaurs, telling myself to be brave. Um, and while I'm drawing, right, and I'm picking colors, I'm like fighting with my dad,
Mm.
you know, my dad being like, why are you using dark colors right now? You should be using lighter colors. I'm like,
Mm.
fuck you, dad. Fuck you, man. I'm going to draw whatever the fuck I want, you know? But I'm also like questioning, I'm like, oh, should I? Should I? Oh, you know, it's
Yeah, yeah.
stressful. It's stressful as hell, you know?
Mm.
But it was just like this
Mhm.
moment of learning, like the parent is always in there. The
Oh man.
critical
Yeah.
voice is the parent, the authority figure in your mind, the God figure in your mind. But it's like
Yeah.
what I've learned to do recently is, you know how sometimes like that critical voice gets particularly loud in your head, like
Mhm.
really loud, you know? Like in May, right when I was finishing up my dissertation and I was about to graduate, I was in New York actually, and my brain kept saying, "You've done everything wrong in your life.
Mm.
Every single step you took was an incorrect step." And it was just like bashing the shit out of me, right? And I was like,
Mm.
why is this voice so loud? And I realized, oh,
Mhm.
it's because I'm doing all the things that I want to do. Like, um, I finished my dissertation, I finished my PhD. I'm working on a new book that I really wanted to work on. I'm doing stand-up comedy more than ever. I'm taking a
Mm.
break. I'm gonna get on unemployment and I'm gonna just take a break for a while. I'm just gonna coast for a while, right?
Yeah.
Things that I was socially told to never ever do, to always be afraid
Mhm.
of, to always
Mhm.
question.
Mhm.
And since I was doing that, that voice got it was like the volume was super loud on that. So
Right.
all I said to myself was, whenever this voice is loud, it just means I'm on the right track.
Mm.
And as I started to do that, code
Mhm.
switching more, I
Yeah.
I was able to get more at peace. I needed to incorporate other things, you know, like I have a cognitive behavioral therapist, like I
Mm-hmm.
take
Mm-hmm.
psychedelic medicines not often, but every once in a while when I need to.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
journal regularly. I meditate regularly. I do EFT, do you know EFT, emotional freedom technique
Yeah.
tapping? I
Oh,
do
yeah,
I
yeah,
do
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I do
Mm-hmm.
that because I have
Mm-hmm.
PTSD. So I do that.
Okay.
I
Mm-hmm.
draw a lot. Art is another, way of keeping that stuff in check. So I do all of those things
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
balance things out and tell
That's
myself that I'm
awesome.
safe.
Yeah.
And that voice
That's
got
great.
lower. But I mean, what do you think of this whole like thing with the orphan and the parent dynamic and that critical voice? I mean, yeah.
That's so interesting about the orphan story. It sounds like it's such a trope. Yeah, I don't know what
Oh,
that's about because there's such shame in Korean culture around orphans
yes.
and even what led up to that, right? Like
Yeah. The hated
that
waif. Yeah.
is, yeah, that's a whole thing that we
But
could
think
look
about
into for
this. It's
sure.
like
Yeah.
they're the most free from
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that shit. They are designed for nonconformity, you know?
Right. We think, right? But then it's like, my cat has an opinion on this. Hold on. It's really active. She was an orphan too.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, and all's good. No, but it's like, so some of the work that I do at Ackerman too is with this group called the Foster Care and Adoption Project, and an
Hmm.
understanding even separation, right, from your birth parents is a trauma, obviously.
Yes,
No
yes.
matter what, even as an
Hmm.
infant,
Yep,
you've already experienced the trauma,
yep.
and that is somatic. It's carried with you. There's also, so I think that kind of that experience and that memory and that trauma, is lived out even as the child grows older
Mm,
and is adopted by loving family. It's still
mm,
very present.
yeah,
And then there's a lot around like epigenetics and intergenerational trauma, and
sure.
so
Yes.
stuff that like that child's birth
Hmm.
family. If you go up generations, there's stuff
Hmm.
that's carried on,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
there's this kind of fantasy. It's just like this really naive
Mm,
fantasy that the
mm,
orphan's starting from scratch, and it's like, and but maybe
mm,
they're using that as a way to
mm.
avoid um, all of the backstory, right? Or
Yeah,
yeah, that's so interesting.
maybe.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think you could do like a whole study around
I think,
because yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. No, I mean, I think it's also like like in like post-war Korea,
Yeah.
right? And like what the orphan trope means. Yeah, it's so interesting.
When I've been reading these books about like the whole adoption systems that were created in the aftermath of the Korean War and that how it was
Hmm.
used for making the United States seem less racist to other nations during the Cold War, and how these Asian babies were used as a way to be like, oh, well, white families are more likely to adopt an Asian baby because they're lighter skinned over a black baby,
Hmm.
and how that it was just like I was like, oh my God, like
Wow.
this is just the layers of
Yeah.
injustice and I mean evil or whatever you want to say call it, but
It's like white supremacy culture.
it's like literally white supremacy
Yeah.
culture that made
Yeah.
Asians like this middle person at all
Right.
times. Like it never stopped.
Right.
It never ever
Right.
ever
Right.
stopped. And it was
Hmm.
always to not deal with their anti-blackness. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
And the fact that Asians were
Hmm.
always used for that purpose is what makes me
Yeah.
so enraged a lot of the
Yeah.
times when I'm reading
Yeah.
those kinds of histories. There's a good book
Hmm.
by Susie Wu called Framed by War that was like really
Mm.
illuminating. It's a very well written book. And I think she's like an American studies person. But
Hmm.
such a good book. But yeah, it's like sad as hell reading that stuff. But yeah, I mean what you're saying is bringing a lot of other thoughts to mind. Yeah, like epigenetics is real, inherited trauma is real. There's like memory that is like in the DNA that may not be
Mm-hmm.
conscious or even subconscious, but
Mm-hmm.
it's in there.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
it's
Mm-hmm.
just part of our whole evolution. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like echoes of trauma that continue down like generation after
Yeah.
generation. And it just really tells you like, there are ways to like it's like why should I care for myself and love for myself and bring myself to a good neutral kind of state? Oh, it's so that I don't pass on bad shit to the next, you know,
Mm-hmm.
generation.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but
Yeah.
to the people around you, So it's like love for the self is really love for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like um
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
yeah, that was like a whole like thing, when I was like judging people, I would like judge people, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of that is just, you pointing finger
Yeah,
right at
judge people.
yourself, right? It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
all of that is
Yeah.
interrelated. But I was even
Absolutely.
thinking
Yeah.
maybe there are some orphans in families, Like I have a
Mm-hmm.
younger brother. I feel like an orphan in my family a lot of the times,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
this is very common among Korean families too, which I'm sure you know,
Mm.
but like my parents left me at my relative's place or my grandparents' place a lot when I was 4 years old. It's a very
Were you in Korea?
I was in Korea.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I was
Mm-hmm.
born in
Right.
Korea and I grew
Yeah.
up there first 5 years of my
Yeah.
life. So four
Mm-hmm.
years old, like you have memory, you know, you
Mm-hmm.
know what it feels like to be left behind. There's no
Right.
explanation for it, even though they explain it. You're four, you can't process
Yeah,
anything,
yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
that stays
Mm-hmm.
with you. And
Mm-hmm.
like when I read these orphan trope things and watch them or whatever, it's like I can relate. You know who else talks about it a
Mm-hmm.
lot? Do you know David Cho or David Che? He's that artist.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he had the exact same thing
Totally.
happen to him, but he was a middle child. Whoa, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
middle son, three sons, middle boy.
Oh
Whoa.
no.
Yeah. And they shipped him
Yeah.
off. They shipped him off to fucking Korea too. He was born in LA. They sent him to fucking Korea with his grandfather. And they were just like,
Wow.
be there for a little while. But it's like, why does that happen? Poverty is the
Mm-hmm.
reason why, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, there's also lack of education. Parents just don't know that doing that, oh, this
Yeah,
is gonna
yeah.
stay with everybody forever. They don't realize,
Right.
you know?
I mean, so many parents, I mean, but especially I think like in the demographic that we're talking about, and I think other, where it's like it's for a long time been very like privileged information to have like all of the sort of the cutting edge information, like how to be the best parent and like attuned and attached in a way that's going to create like secure attachment for your child. Like a lot of people don't have access to that information. And especially like I mean, we're talking about like immigrant families. Forget about it. I mean, you're just trying to survive, right? Like day to
Mm-hmm.
day. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, in my family, I was born in the US. We didn't have any Korean family nearby. So that wasn't an option. But there was definitely like, I think across racial lines, like immigrant families share this similar thing where there's just that your parents are working really hard. There's just no time for feelings. There's no time to like
Yeah.
have sad feelings or angry. There's just
Yeah.
like no one gives a shit,
Yeah.
so it's just you've got to like work it out. And I think that's
Yeah.
another, it's not a perfect scenario, but it's like our basic needs are met, right? Like
Yeah.
I was never worried. And my parents, I
Mm.
know, like were doing the best they could at that
Mhm.
time,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I think like we have to do our own work, um, and not to fault our parent, but we have to,
Yes.
like what you're saying, like the reparenting or caring for
Yeah.
myself or like
Yeah.
understanding like what my needs are emotionally, like what my wounding was, what my work is and my healing, and like
Mhm.
then how do I take responsibility for myself in this way to care for myself and also find the relationships, that are going to be supportive, to me and what I deserve and what I feel like
Mm.
what I've needed. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think, but yeah, I mean, when we were in Korea, and when I was learning about Han and
Mhm.
sorry.
And making all that amazing video work
Yeah,
around Han was
yeah,
fucking incredible.
and looking at the both the like the philosophical Han, but also like Han is like the that bitterness,
Hmm.
the longing, the
Hmm.
sadness. I
Resentment.
resentment. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I really got it. I mean, I really now I was like, oh, I totally
Hmm.
understand. It wasn't in any kind of like essentializing way. It was
Hmm.
like I get Koreans so much more now, and I get my parents so much more now.
Yeah.
Like I think that the whole, especially for like, I don't know if this happened, if you could see this in your family, but like, I think as like Korean and Asian
Hmm.
immigrants in particular, I mean, East Asian, like the experience of like depression
Hmm.
and melancholy, right?
Hmm.
Which is kind of like this sort of internalized rage and
It's
anger.
repressed Han.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like that just feels so
It's
prevalent when I think about
everywhere.
like,
It's like in the
yeah.
furniture, it's like in the food. Like my maternal grandmother who was raising me when I was like 4 years old, and I was very close to her when I was a child. She is a mess. She's a slob. Like everything is a disarray, disorder, chaos, hoarding. It's a nightmare. My
Mm,
mom is similar. My mom's older sister is similar when I go to their houses. My dad is the opposite. He's like OCD. Everything needs to be clean. Everything needs to be perfect. He's like, Marine man, right? Like he was in the Marines. So he's like that.
hmm
So whenever my mom's just lounging at home, just watching TV, and then we hear my dad, walk into the driveway, or we hear the car pull up, or we hear the keys, my mom starts freaking out. I'm like, clean
hmm
everything, your father, or something, right? Like that was the thing. And then one day, my grandmother says to me, "Oh no, my aunt," she says to me, "I went to the doctor about the messiness in the house, and the doctor said it's a form of depression." I was like,
mm,
so
mm.
Haimani's depressed. My mom is depressed. She's depressed.
Oh,
And
wow.
my mom's
Wow.
very like she's the kind of person who
Hmm
shuts down rather than blow up, you know? My dad's the opposite. He blows up all the
hmm
time. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like even though don't say words, like you were talking about the transphobic sibling, even though
Yeah.
they say certain things, what the feeling that emanates and the feeling that's
Yes.
received on the other end is
Right.
totally different,
hmm
and that is the real thing to that person. The words barely
Yeah.
matter. That the
Exactly.
feeling is what stays.
Yeah, there's a chart, there's an energy to it. There's a charge and an energy, a vibe,
Vibe.
and that
Yeah,
that is totally
it's
real
undeniable.
and it's
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's
undeniable.
felt, right? Yeah.
It's why,
Yeah,
like, when we look
for
at these,
sure.
like, the diversity statement that I have to fucking write every time I write an application for these tenure track positions, a
Ugh.
diversity statement. I'm like, why do I have to write a diversity statement? Why don't you show me your diversity statement? It's just to see if I'm safe going into your goddamn institution.
Yeah.
Everything's so backwards, but it's like they use words,
hmm
right? Like this whole intellectual community is about
hmm
using words, 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 words,
Yes.
words. But
Yes,
it's like
yes,
words
totally.
are limited. There's a big limitation
To
to words.
Totally. I mean, especially in this stuff we're talking. Have you read My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa
Mm-mm,
Menakem?
mm-mm.
Really good, really, really good shit. So,
My grandmother's sand?
my grandmother's hands. Let me find
Oh, my
the
grandmother's hand.
book.
Okay.
Yeah, it's this is the what it looks
Oh,
like.
okay. It's a beautiful cover.
Um, Racialized trauma and the pathway to mending our hearts and bodies. So, Resmaa Menakem he was actually trained as a social worker and trauma therapist and a
Mm,
somatic experiencing therapist. He's black cisgender guy. He's based in Minneapolis, but he's kind of like he's sort of blown up in the
mm-hmm,
therapy field and like
mm,
anti-racist work.
mm-hmm,
Because his whole thing is about like understanding racialized trauma and experiencing experiences of race as embodied and somatic,
mm.
and that we privilege language and
Yeah.
even feelings too much,
Ah,
right? And that actually this stuff is alive in our bodies. So
yeah.
so he does all of these. I'm in this. He developed this practice called somatic abolitionism.
Uh-huh.
And I've been doing this 9 month somatic abolitionism training program for coaches and therapists, and learning these ways of like being able to work with like our own experiences of like racialized harm and trauma in our
Yeah.
body. And
Yeah.
it's so like, it's so, the first thing is like letting go of the story,
Yeah.
because we get so caught up in like, oh, this is what happened to me, right? And
Yeah.
so, and when we're so stuck in just telling the story,
Yep.
we are just sort of stuck in that experience. Our bodies are
Yes.
stuck. Like we're just sort
Trapping
of
ourselves. Yeah.
reliving it over and over,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
how do we release it? How do we
Mm.
begin to actually like metabolize and work for ourselves, right? Not
Yeah.
even like,
Yeah.
I mean, just to be able to like heal
To
and
live.
metabolize.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
When we talk about like what does liberation look like, what does liberatory practice look like,
Right.
we have to
Mm-hmm.
start right here in our entire like mind body system. And so it has been amazing to like, because I've been in a lot of different kinds of like healing groups and anti-racist groups um, and trainings and this and that. But it's like this work, I can't even really, like when I try to explain it, it's like words don't even really
Yeah.
do it
I'm
justice,
sure.
because I'm like, I
I'm
don't,
sure.
because I also don't know exactly how it happened. It was just really like, yeah, I know that when I started the program, I was carrying a lot of
Yeah.
stuff from like
Yeah.
experiences. I mean, especially
Yes.
like during COVID,
Uh-huh.
and all of the like the horrible shit happening to
Yeah.
East Asian people and in particular
Yeah.
women, and like
Yeah.
stuff that people were saying, groups I was
Uh-huh.
involved in, and shit
Uh-huh.
I was like experiencing, and so I knew that was holding a lot of like
Yeah.
rage, anger, and fear when I started this program. As we started over the months, I don't even really know how, there wasn't like one moment, but it was like gradually doing these practices, doing it in community. And it's all sort of learning how to process somatically
Mm.
and not rely on language and story,
Mm.
um, but to be able to start to attune to like these different intelligences of our bodies. And one of them is
Mm.
is vibration, right? Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
another one is affect. Another one is like
Mm-hmm.
images or meaning making, or,
Yes.
so like you begin to sort of process and speak in this different way, and then and do it with other people in community where you're being witnessed and people are responding to. And then like over time, it just, all of that stuff doesn't have the same chart, like it was released, like somehow just didn't have this grip on me that it did. And I don't, there wasn't like one day where it was like, oh, there it went, I'm like totally
Yeah.
done. It was just sort of like very gradually. I was like, okay, like I can, and
Yeah.
now I can actually tell the story, and it's not triggering. It's
Yeah.
not, I can just describe it. It's just facts, right? It's not
Yeah.
like, and I can
You
still,
have
maybe I
mindful
can,
detachment
yeah,
from it. Yeah.
an agency, right? I have agency
Yes.
over the
Oh God.
experience where it's not driving me. Like I can be in charge of how, this goes.
You
So
know, we like
yeah.
socially, we need more people like you doing this kind of work because there are a lot of people on our side, fellow
Mm-hmm.
progressives and liberals,
Mm-hmm.
fellow mindful folk who are caught up in the narrative so
Yes.
hard that
Yeah.
all they do is re-trap themselves over and over and over again. And there's this
Mm-hmm.
big misconception of disempowerment or limitations being empowerment, and a
Mm-hmm.
real bizarre kind of ideation that being angry equals wokeness.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Right.
I'm just like, I've been reading like Loretta Ross's writings a lot. I took a course that she was offering, and she's all about like, you know, how do we get out of this angry, resentful state of mind? Because it's no way to
Mm-hmm.
live, you know? Staying there is
Mm-hmm.
no way to live. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I kept asking
Yeah.
people during the whole Me Too movement, I was like, what comes after Me Too? There was just
Mm.
more rage, more anger, more blame, more
Yeah.
anger. And the
Yeah.
thing about anger is, and I'm sure you know this, is like there's no end to anger and
Mm.
rage. It just keeps piling on more and more and more, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you got to figure out a way to transmute that, shift it to the progressiveness. If we want to call ourselves progressive, let's move forward,
Mm-hmm.
not keep
Right.
building more bricks with the narrative, the system's against us. The forefathers
Yeah. Yeah.
designed it
Yeah.
this way. You know, we are all
Mm-hmm.
marginalized. Da, 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 da. It's like, okay, all of that just makes you
Right.
feel more trapped and disempowered. And that's how I felt when I met with my financial advisors 2 days ago. There's this thing called Brunch and Budget. Amazing group, amazing team, amazing philosophy. But when they're trying to give me like financial advice, they keep inserting lectures like, oh, the
Mm.
system's designed to be against you. Oh, yeah, you have every right to be angry. And I just told them, I was like, I feel worse having this meeting with you
Mm.
than I did just sitting on my
Mm.
couch not thinking about any of this. I was like, I wish you had
Mm.
brought me more information to offer me hope and relief rather than
Yeah. Yeah.
re-trigger all this stuff that I keep
Right.
level through all the fucking work
Right.
that I do. And I had to give him that talk because I was fully triggered and I was fully enraged. And after the meeting, fucking suicidal thoughts because I just realized how devalued I am. You know what I mean? So I had to
Mm.
just tell them, give them feedback, be like, you're doing this incorrectly. Just so you know, I know your intentions are good, but
Yeah.
the way you're
Yeah.
doing it is incorrect because it's actually making the clients feel less
That's right.
empowered, you know?
Were they
And
able to hear that?
initially, no. And I had to tell
Mm.
her, I was like, okay, when you keep cutting me off, she was being defensive. I was like, when you keep cutting me off, then like we could just end this meeting because you're
Yeah.
not letting me speak. But
Mm-hmm.
that feedback helped her and she listened to me.
Good. Good.
But
Good. Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think the other thing we
Mm-hmm.
people like us need to keep in mind is power is something that can't be given or taken
Mm-hmm.
away. It's
Mm-hmm.
there at all times. Our
Yeah.
default baseline as an existence, as a living being, is power. It's energy. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that can't
Mm-hmm.
be taken away. There are multiple
Mm-hmm.
realities at work at all times. That one layer of reality being something we have to acknowledge, the neoliberal, neo-colonial, the systems against us. Yeah, that is fucking real. You know, racism and patriarchy, that's all real. That is a layer of reality and we have to acknowledge it. But there's another
Mm-hmm.
layer of reality that exists in you that is never ever gonna go away, which is that you
Mm-hmm.
are inherently of value, you know,
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
of love, of good
Mm-hmm.
things, yeah, of light. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that a lot of us don't fucking realize or know, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I 100% and um I'm very intentional around when I do work with groups and talking about race and racial identity and racialized trauma, that it's so critically, I mean, there's one part of it, it's almost like developmental, right? So like sometimes when people are first, if you identify as a person of color or person of a global majority,
Mm,
that there's first a lot of anger, right? When there's this sort of realization phase of like this
mm-hmm,
is happening, and yeah, and I think that we have to be able to have an expansive, um, complex understanding of anger and the role of anger. And one of my teachers, and Lama Rod Owens, wrote a book called Love and Rage, and it's exactly talking about like how to skillfully work with
mm,
experiences of anger, especially
mm-hmm,
as someone who's BIPOC and
mm-hmm,
of a sort of
mm-hmm,
marginalized identity and
mm-hmm,
marginalized in the U.S. Right,
mm,
so. Um, so we, yes, we'd have to do that, but it's we also that's just like part of it. Like we can't just walk around with all, because if you don't then move towards something um that is also like replenishing and made from like resilience, then the anger will eat you alive. And like that is
mm-hmm,
also, and we see this all the time in like different, like, especially with certain activist groups, and like where it's just like, or just, in the Me Too movement, where it's like the
Hmm.
sort of like
Hmm.
whole, okay, now, what's the Audre Lorde quote, where like you can't use the master's tools, right?
Hmm.
Like but it's like people are just sort of like,
Exactly the same.
it's like, so I think using I'm much more interested in what's the language of resiliency and
Yeah.
wholeness,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and because like when you think about like us, when I think about, you know, in those moments, in the past year, the like horrific
Uh-huh.
murders in Atlanta,
Uh-huh.
when all of it
Uh-huh.
was happening,
Yeah.
and like here in my neighborhood,
Yes.
I mean, it's
In
just
New
like, even, I mean, a little bit still now. I mean,
Yeah.
I could walk out. I'm not really
You
sure
never know.
what could happen,
Mm.
right? But like, do I walk around with this like kind of, this sense of like the trauma and the fear? And like the thing that helped me, um actually, that was just like this, it was like this force against this like real like protective force, was actually remembering my ancestors and the
Mm.
pride of like
Mm-hmm.
of Korean people, and like the pride
Yeah.
of the beauty, the spirituality, the faith, the like all of these things of my grandmother, my aunts and uncles, and just thinking about like that, like these people are amazing, and like my parents, and and then I was just like, fuck this. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
what I'm made of. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go out there and remember all of this,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the way that, white supremacy culture works, is it's there to deplete, right?
Yeah.
And to subjugate. And we have agency in that, right? But we have to also, you know, kind of get out of those systems, and also like psychically, emotionally divest,
Yeah.
right, from the narratives, from the stories.
Yeah.
And I think it's like finding the communities of other people who are invested in doing this kind of work, right? Doing this healing work, and doing the
Yeah.
restorative work, doing the resiliency work. It's like, I don't want to talk about like my subjugated identity. I want to talk
Yeah.
about my resilient
Yeah.
identity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm interested in talking to young people about, and to
Yes.
families, right? That,
Uh-huh.
and Resma in his trainings, it's almost like a mantra when people are
Yeah.
coming forward with these stories of like their own racialized trauma.
Uh-huh.
He just says, you are not defective.
Yeah. And
You are
everybody
not
has it.
defective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like it literally it
Yeah.
hurts everybody. That racialized trauma,
Yeah.
it hurts white people
Absolutely.
too. That's the
Oh,
thing that they
yeah.
don't realize. Even
Exactly. Yeah.
misogyny and sexism and rape, it hurts the
Yeah.
victimizer just as much as the victim. That's the
Yes.
other thing that people
Absolutely.
overlook all the
Absolutely.
times.
Absolutely.
When you were
Yeah.
talking about like that force with the ancestor stuff, I was like getting so emotional, and I
Mm.
think that's like, you mentioned like white supremacy makes it clouds our vision. It makes us forget that part. It like
Hmm. Oh,
severs that,
yeah.
disconnects us, dislocates us mentally and
Yeah.
emotionally like that, spiritually like
Right.
that.
It's one of the ways it works. Yeah.
It's
Yes.
so it
Right.
goes deep. That's what it means. It
Yes.
goes fucking deep, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like remembering home too, like,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
I just kind of picked this up in random. It was like a queer anthropologist studies person. They were like, home is not a place you try to go back to. Home is a place you try to
Mm.
arrive at. I was like, oh my God, like
Mm.
the profundity of
Hmm.
that. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
but
Right.
that's the thing. We got to
Right.
create a vision for ourselves. Where do
Hmm.
we want to get to?
That's right.
Got to
Yep.
write it out and envision it, feel it,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
keep going there rather than look back
Yes.
and be pissed off constantly. You know,
Yes.
I
Yes.
love everything you're
Yes.
saying. I
Yeah.
feel like this is everything that I wanted to. touch on. I was like, I don't know
Awesome.
exactly what I want to ask Helen, but I trust that like she knows. She knows. She's been here. She knows. She gets it. You know, last year I was dealing with a lot of like around this time, October last year, I was dealing with like trauma around race in a classroom,
Mm,
in a
mm,
position where I was being treated like this middle person, the middle minority, but the way I was being treated in that room was like I was being treated like a cis white man, you know?
oof.
And
Hmm.
that was really traumatic. And I had migraines for 12 days. And that's when I was
Oh
like,
God.
I have to write greeting cards to people that mean something to me. And you were on the list. I was like, I should write a
Mm.
letter to Helen
Aw,
too, because I was
that
just
was
like,
an amazing
I feel
letter.
like
Yeah.
I just kind of
Yeah.
intuitively, instinctively knew. I was like, I feel like she has some insight into the answer to this problem. Because at the time,
Hmm.
I was just kind of like stuck in the whole rage stuff, but I was trying to get out of it. I was like, what's the answer
Hmm.
to this? Where's the relief here? But that was
Hmm.
the start of that.
Yeah.
Like, once you start questioning that, you're able
Right.
to find the path outward. So, um,
Hmm.
thank you for all this illuminating stuff. It's so much here. And thank you for that book recommendation. I
Yeah,
will
yeah, for sure.
definitely
Yeah,
read it.
I'll send you I'll send you another resource. So he has these groups. He works with a group called the Education for Racial Equity,
Yeah.
and they actually have like these year-long, there's another program called communal consultations
Mm,
where, so I mean, if you're interested in learning about somatic abolitionism, I'm going to send you like an interview that he did too, where you can like, because it's really like, I think it's the way. It's like,
mm-hmm.
we need we need the policy changes. We need
Yep.
all the like, how to be an anti-racist. Like people
Yes.
need to read that stuff, and
Yep.
that's
Yep.
important.
Uh-huh.
And we need like embodied human person to person relational way of that's like the deep, deep interpersonal, and like internal healing, like that has to be done. And it's so
It's
much about,
absolutely necessary.
yeah, like having a vision, having like a vision of like our fullness and
Uh-huh.
living into it and actually
Yeah.
just tapping into it because it's here,
Yeah.
right? And
It is.
yeah, and knowing that that's, and to make that choice, like this is the conversation I'm having. I don't know what conversation
Exactly.
you're gonna have, but I'm not
Exactly.
interested in that. So I'm not gonna have that conversation anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
I love
done.
that too. You have a
Yeah.
choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Is like people
Yeah.
think that like, other things and other things dictate what we're gonna think and say and feel. It's like, no, no, no. That could
Right.
happen, but you can always come back to yourself and be like, what am I gonna choose to think and feel and say right now? Right?
Mm-hmm.
We
That's
always
right.
have a choice. And that in and of itself is immensely liberating. Ugh,
Yes.
love this.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All kinds of like I'm in it. I'm bathing in it. Yes. This is what I wanted and needed. Thank you, Helen. This is
Thank
amazing.
you.
And thank
Oh
you for
my
the
God.
resources. Have you heard of this
Absolutely.
book, Women Who Run with the Wolves?
Oh yeah, I haven't read that in so long, but
Yeah.
yes,
My
I
therapist
loved that.
recommended it
Yeah.
to me like yesterday. She's like, Grace, I think
Oh
you're ready
yeah.
for this book now. I was like, okay. And
Nice.
she was like, the one thing I'm glad you're not. She's like, I don't think you're numb to your anger. And I think that's a good thing. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was like, yeah, I feel it all the time. I'm not numb to that. She's like, learn to harness it. I was like, okay.
Mm.
But thank you for this talk. And one last question. Do
Mm-hmm.
you have any form of creative expression or artistic expression that you're currently engaging in at the moment?
That has been so on my mind, because I have been recently, I've really been missing that a lot. So I actually have, I had sort of started talking with a group of friends, like a few people who I did my MFA with,
Mm-hmm.
and we were starting to have conversations about how to sort of integrate, digital technology and just different forms of like media in with, like healing practices and like liberatory practices and like
Mm-hmm.
what would that look like? We were
Mm-hmm.
like virtual reality is kind of like we were
Oh,
having all of, so that
Yeah.
is because I've been so caught up in just like work
Learning,
and everything and
workshopping.
moving and
Yeah.
life transitions. But
Right.
yeah, that is on the forefront of my mind. So not
Yeah.
active now,
But it's
but
percolating.
just feeling the need for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, thank you for
I'm sure you're
asking.
gonna get there. I'm sure VR sounds amazing. That VR and
Yeah,
affect and creating new worlds. Dude, that's like a whole other epic.
I know yeah,
Holy cow.
that's like the dream. So I'm
Ugh,
trying to like okay, I need to like buy some of those
dude, you're gonna
goggles.
get there. I mean, you're designed for it. You're the one that's made for it. I'm super excited. Thanks, Helen.